Have you ever boarded a metro train at 9 a.m. on a Monday? Okay. Even if you haven't, which I'm sure many of you haven't, you know what it's like. You're definitely not going to get a place to sit down. You probably won't be able to stand, and you may not even be able to enter the train, right? And that's what I expect from the metro train as well whenever I board it. But there was this one time where I had the entire train to myself. That's because I boarded it on a Sunday at 5 a.m. But in my mind, it was impossible that a metro train could be that empty. I couldn't imagine myself just standing there with no one else in the train. And so when I had that experience 1 year ago, I started to wonder, do I just happen to use the metro when it's always crowded? Is it normally this empty on a weekend morning? And to me, there was only one way to answer that question. I needed data. So that's what I did. I went to the metro authorities and got the data I wanted. And luckily, they sent it to me. But what they sent to me was billions of rows of numbers that made absolutely no sense. It was just noise. But I love working with data, so I spent some time with the data, trying to understand what it meant. And one interesting discovery we made was that there were two stations in the city, one in Mysore Road and one in Beratana Agrahara. And only one person had ever traveled between them. Can you imagine? There's traffic on the ground, it's absolutely jam-packed. Yet, only one person chose to take the metro to get between those two places. What does that say about the metro network? What does that say about the way our city is designed? Each question led to another question, and with each question, we started investigating it in more detail. To answer the first question I had on the weekend low ridership, we started to look at a pattern. So as we would expect, there's a morning office hour rush and an evening office hour rush on weekdays. But this is not the case at every station. There are stations like Chickpet where more people use it in the middle of the day than either the morning or the evening. And like this, we started investigating in more detail. We started looking at geographic bubbles. If you happen to live on Outer Ring Road, you may not have ever been to Yeshwanthpur or Rajajinagar or Vijayanagar. That's because it's inaccessible. And even if you do have the metro, you probably end up visiting a very small section of the city. So what we found out is that if you happen to live near a station like Trinity, you're probably only visiting 20 other stations in the whole city, and you end up living in a sort of bubble within the city. And these are the kinds of questions we try to answer with data. My name is Vivek.
And my name is Aman, and together we run something called diagram chasing. When people ask us what exactly it is that we do, it's a little hard to answer because at any given point in time, we are wearing multiple different hats. We work with data for each of our projects, but we don't consider ourselves data scientists. We like to write about that data and the things that we read and see around us, but we're not journalists. And we definitely don't like to think of ourselves as just software engineers. We are two nerds who have had a lot of time over the last 2 years to kind of create the work that we wanted to see for India. We exist at a very interesting time. Interest in data has never been higher, and the ability to access it and understand it has also fallen. The barriers of access have fallen. I think that's great. There are more and more people participating in this conversation, which makes it better for everybody. But on the other side, when I go onto the internet, I see this flood of vibe-coded dashboards, explorers, automated reports, all rushing to offer you insights. And I don't think that's the answer. I think we have become a little more confused because of the flood of noise. And make no mistake, I think there's an appetite for understanding these realities, about understanding our metros, our spaces, the news, climate, weather, elections, and so on. But you cannot just throw data into Claude and then give it to someone and expect them to give a shit. So what we do at diagram chasing and what we consider our job is to build these entry points for you into these complex realities. If you go to our website, you'll find not only interactive articles which are beautifully illustrated, but also open archives, open data sets, resources, code that you can use to not only understand the topic that we are talking about, but also do something of your own with it.
All of us would like to solve problems using technology. And it's not just us as normal people, even the government loves using technology. So when the local municipal government decided to build an app to solve potholes, when do you think they thought of this idea? Turns out they did this almost 10 years ago, in 2017. And yet, here we are, 10 years later, we haven't solved the problem of potholes. Clearly, it's not a problem of technology, it's somewhere else. But the issue is that every month you see yet another pothole app being made. And thanks to Cloud and AI, it's just getting even easier to make the same thing yet again. And this doesn't solve the root problem. The reason a pothole is there is not because the app was not there. The reason the government doesn't do its job is not because they didn't have an app that can solve it for them. There's a deeper systemic problem in the government, in many issues we face in our daily life. And unless we are willing to understand the topic in greater detail, we'll probably not be able to solve it at all, let alone Claude or whatever AI we have. So I think the idea of moving fast and trying to build the next pothole app is not going to fix the pothole. Instead, if you could pay a bit more attention to the news we read, every time you read an article about roads, potholes, or whatever, do we actually just read the headline or do we end up reading the whole article? Do we try to question why the article is written a certain way? And you might be surprised, but your MLA is not responsible for the pothole on the road. There's someone else who's in charge of that. Yet, we choose to complain to the MLA every time. Aren't you surprised that all of us should be smarter about knowing how our city works, about who is responsible for the pothole? And if you actually knew the answers to these questions, why don't you talk to more people about it? If you know people are uneducated about certain topics, shouldn't we be telling them, this is how the city works, this is how the government works? And I think unless we choose to have deeper conversations about these kinds of topics, and if we use AI in a way that helps us to understand these topics, we won't be able to actually solve the problems.
So I'll give you an example of one such conversation. Over the last few years, a lot of people, and not by their choice, have become aware of the Indian Censor Board. Every few months, they'll come in and they'll censor a popular movie. Most recently, it was Superman, where they cut out around 10 seconds worth of, it was a kissing scene for 10 seconds, they cut it out. Everybody reported on it, there was a lot of outrage. But it makes people wonder, I mean, why censor that, right? There is a lot worse going on in our movies. They also wonder, is 10 seconds a lot? Is it too little? Is there more? They also wonder if Superman had been played by Ranbir Kapoor and the movie was called Animal, would those 10 seconds still have been cut out? I don't know. I love movies, so these are the questions that I think of. And so far, there was no way for us to answer anything about censorship. So I went up to a journalist who was reporting on these issues, and I asked him, hey man, where are you getting this data from? I also want to know. And he pointed me to this obscure government portal, and he said that, if you access it in this way, you'll land on a movie, hopefully you get what you want, right? So this was interesting, because we figured out a way not to collect just one movie, but every single movie that portal had. And we created something called CBFC Watch. CBFC Watch ended up collecting 20,000 movies over the last 10 years. We had 100,000 censorship records. And that means not only could we do our analysis, you could look at the movies that you cared about. You could search for actors, you could search for topics, what is being censored more of, what is being censored less of. And we put it out into the world. And this was great. This was the first time it was ever done. And because the government shut down that portal, that original portal, it is also the last time it could be ever done. So we set out to answer our questions. Now let's talk about those 10 seconds. Most movies are usually censored somewhere around 10 seconds to 1 minute. There are some movies which are also censored for over half an hour. That means half an hour gone. If you didn't set out to make a short film, well, congratulations, you're there. All right? Now, I could also answer the question that I actually wanted to. Are certain things being censored more or less of? Yes. So on the top, you can see that violent content is being censored even lesser. And we are seeing an increase in the religious and political censorship of topics, which, if you've been around for the last 12 years, is it a surprise? I don't think it is. So this was used by everybody. It was reported internationally. People used this data. Finally, could put a number that 720 hours had been taken out of movies over the last 10 years, and it was very great for everybody. And we were really happy that people were using this data. It also led to very interesting interactions where journalists would reach out to us and ask a question that we had never thought of asking. Are there movie titles being changed by the censor board? Yes, there was. So we were able to answer this journalist question, and we found 50 such instances of movie titles being changed. This is great because our job, the way we see it, is not to have the final word in this conversation, but let you have a first one.
Take a look at these images. Where do you think these were taken from? What document were they taken from? Clearly, it seems like a dry, boring document, so maybe something the government made, right? But if you actually looked at it in more detail, you would also find these images in the same document. This is from the census in 1971 and in 1981. In that era, the government chose to make infographics to educate people about very specific technical topics. And these are just 4 among over 700 such infographics that the government chose to make back in 1971 and in 1981. And so what we decided to do is to create an interactive archive so you can see every single one of these. And it's very important to know why the government made these. They had a problem that today we know as the population explosion. There was a fear that if the population continued to grow the way it was, that humanity would go extinct. So the solution was to reduce the population. And one way they thought of doing this is to get people to understand that you need to have less children. So they made these graphics. And so when we decided to make the archive, we knew that the context behind why the government did something it did, and it spent so much time making these, is very important to understand why they made it. And you might think that this is something the government is incapable of doing today. I also think it's something many of us are incapable of doing today. We are just interested in getting something out the next day. We aren't willing to spend time building the best version of something. We aren't willing to deeply engage with a topic as much as we should to make the best version of it.
So that leads us to how we work. For each of our projects, between the two of us, we'll first ask 100 questions. We'll grill each other. We'll do red team, blue team, or all of those terms that you know of, right? And we know that after those 100 questions, we'll land at the good 5 that will be of interest to you and that you can use to understand the topic that we're talking about. And I love this process because it is where I learn the most, and I would not trade it for being able to do a story faster. I love this process. The other thing that when we can't do something, we'll get humans to give their perspective in. Now, nobody pays us for running diagram chasing. But we spend out of our own pockets to hire human artists to come in, offer their perspectives onto what we're talking about. This is from our last story about the census. So we got an illustrator, she did her own research, she came up with this style, she iterated, and she brought this humor to these comics that I would never have been able to give. Again, amazing things happen when humans get together to build something. Things take long. We are becoming obsessed with optimizing for efficiency. Each of our projects lasts anywhere between 4 to sometimes 8 months in the case of CBFC Watch. In the middle of that project, I hated it. I hated the fact that it was taking this long. I hated the struggle. But now that I look back, that struggle has given the output the form that it has. And again, I would not trade it for a faster output. So where does that lead us? Well, honestly, if I was to tell you, I don't think what we're doing is anything special. You could do it too. You could analyze data, you could code, you could write. But I think what is special is the fact that we've just been doing it. And I would like to see more such people engaging in storytelling about the topics that they care about. So where do we go from here? I think 3 things can make this better. Firstly, as a consumer, I would like you to ask more questions. I would like you to ask that vibe coder what exactly is in that dashboard that he has made. Does he understand the topic? Can we demand better out of these kind of insightful pieces? Can we, when we are creating, can we ask deeper level questions to understand the topic better ourselves so that we can say something about it? Secondly, if possible, make things slowly, slow down, it's all right. If you spend time with something, you are actually leading yourself to a deeper understanding. Speed does not get you that. And if you can automate it in a day, your audience will forget it in a day. Our audience looks forward to our pieces because they know that the people behind them have given a damn. And lastly, Whether it's to a bot or to someone else, don't outsource your curiosity. Caring is a step that you cannot skip. If you're asking the right questions, ask about the questions that matter to you. There's a chance that they might matter to other people as well. And the internet has infinite content. Right now, what it is short on is the people who have looked at something closely and want to tell people about it. And our hope is that diagram chasing can be an example of how that can work. Thank you.